Hey there, today I'll share my personal experience with inducing my labor naturally and how I did that. My name is Sophie, I'm a pelvic health physiotherapist specialized in maternity care, and through my online coaching program, I support moms-to-be from all over the world to prepare their pelvis for an easy delivery and quick recovery. So if that's something you're into, I invite you to apply on a free discovery call with me in the description below so we can see if we're a fit to work together. All right, so I don't know how much you know about my first pregnancy story, but long story short, I was dealing with gestational diabetes and the possibility of a big baby at birth. My ultrasound was basically showing that baby was in the 95th percentile for weight and size in my third trimester. And there were discussions about inducing me at 39 weeks if my labor had not started naturally. So I was highly motivated in triggering my labor naturally before that time mark. And aside from that, I'd say that I was quite done with being pregnant by 37, 38 weeks. I had lots of discomfort in my ribs that was impacting my sleep. I was extremely out of breath, and I was so hot because it was the middle of the summer. I could not do much. I was so big. Anyway, all in all, I think at 38 weeks, I was quite ready to meet my baby. I know some moms are like, I'm okay if I go late, I'm feeling good, I'm not in a rush. And to me, when people say that, it's really a sign that their pregnancy has been super smooth, right? Because any mom I know who's dealing with pain symptoms in their third trimester normally wants to move on quicker. Anyway, so I had in mind that if I could give birth around the 38 weeks mark, and I don't know why I picked that number, but that's what came to mind and that's what felt right, then I would be quite happy. So the first thing I did was to book weekly acupuncture sessions from 36 weeks of pregnancy. Acupuncture is a modality that I'm very familiar and comfortable with just from my infertility background. I use acupuncture to improve fertility before we did IVF, and then I also had treatments through my IVF journey and also through my first trimester to support progesterone and reduce the risk of miscarriage. So I'm super comfortable with this kind of treatment, and it's always felt like like a little oasis of peace when I go for acupuncture. It's like my me time, it's nice and warm. I sometimes have a snooze during the treatment, and I just have so much trust in the therapist I work with. So I had no trouble with the idea of going for acupuncture to help initiate labor. So when I was 37 weeks, I went to the doctor on, I think it was the Monday, and I asked to check my cervix. And they said I was 1 centimeter dilated. So that gave me a lot of hope that maybe something would start soon. However, I talked with my doula and she said, some people stay at 1 centimeter forever. So it's not super indicative of anything happening. But I was still hopeful that it meant that my body was getting somewhat ready for birth soon-ish. On the Thursday, I was 37 plus 5. Went to my acupuncture session, and I felt a bit of a shift that day in how I felt. Just feeling maybe a bit more nauseated after the treatment, but I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, oh, maybe it's just a coincidence. On the Friday, I'm 37 plus 6, and I just decided to get my breast pump out and just familiarize myself with it. And I also had in mind that maybe pumping could trigger labor because of that release of oxytocin. And I had heard from clients of mine who had tried it that they got into labor that day. So I was like, there's nothing wrong trying it. So I got the electric pump out. It was so unpleasant and uncomfortable. I was just thinking, oh my God, how will I tolerate breastfeeding if this feels like horrific? But whatever, I tolerated 10 minutes on both breasts. Around midnight that night, I needed to go to the bathroom, so I got up and went peeing, and as I stood from the toilet, I felt something warm leaking down my leg. So my first reflex was like, oh my God, did I just pee myself? So I smelled it, and it did not smell like pee at all. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think my water broke. So I woke my partner up and he asked the same thing. It was like, you're sure you didn't pee yourself? I was like, I'm pretty sure. But it was not like a big gush of water, you know, like that you see in movies sometimes where it like goes everywhere. It was just like kind of a little thing, right? And I learned later that it was called a slow leak. That means the amniotic sac does not rupture fully, but just partially. So instead of losing my waters all at once, I was just losing a little bit here and there when I was moving. And that was so annoying. I remember I filled up like 6 or 7 of those gigantic adult diaper pads through the night, just like I was, you know, standing up, going to the bathroom, and then there would be some leaking or like a turn in bed. So yeah, it kind of like slowly leaked through the night. 2 hours later, my contractions started and I labored at home for a good 24 hours after my waters broke. If you have watched my full birth story though, you will know that unfortunately my labor ended up stalling at some point and I had to be induced anyway with oxytocin. And honestly, I felt like so defeated at that point because I had worked so hard to get into labor naturally. But honestly, looking back, I'm just so glad that I experienced the slow progression of labor and just being able to be at home for the first little bit, you know, and be with my partner in our little bubble, kind of build up that anticipation, right? Whereas if I had been induced at the hospital right away, I would have never had that experience, right? And I would have been in labor 100% in the hospital without that slow build up. And I think it would have been harder psychologically to handle that versus like that slow progression. I'm also so happy that I got into labor at 38 weeks. So crazy that my wish was heard, right? I was like at 38 weeks and like it was literally at midnight when I turned 38 weeks that my water broke. And I don't know, you know, if I had given birth a week later, I don't even know if I would have been able to give birth vaginally because my baby was quite big already at 38 weeks. So I'm really glad that I was able to help triggering labor earlier. So in the end, I don't regret anything. And of course, if I had the choice, I would have preferred to avoid the induction later on. But it's just the way it is, right? And I was still super happy with my birth experience, you know, like having experienced a vaginal birth and also not too much tearing and damage. So I was quite thankful for that. Anyways, keen to hear your stories about triggering labor naturally. And as I said earlier, if you're interested in a comprehensive coaching program to prepare your pelvic floor for a positive birth, I would love to chat with you over a free discovery call. You can apply in the description below. Thanks for watching.